And welcome to Habs Unfiltered, episode 188. I'm your host, Blaine Putney, and I'm joined now by a very special guest, Jack Han. Jack, welcome to the show.
Hi, Blaine. Really happy to be here.
Honestly, you've been someone I've been trying to get for quite some time, and I'm just really excited to have you here, especially today with such timely news. With Niku signing with the Canadiens, and you had a very, very interesting take several days back about Sami Niku, and I want to get into that, but I want to just let my listeners know a little bit about you and where you're what you're doing now. So could you give them a little bit of a background?
Yeah, sure. So between 2017 and 2020, I worked in the Toronto Maple Leafs organization, first in player development, then in the front office, and then in my third year as an assistant coach with the AHL's Toronto Marlies. Since that time, I've been working as a private consultant for players from minor hockey all the way up to NHL prospects. I've been active on Twitter, writing for a free newsletter, and also writing several books about how to break down hockey from an insider's perspective. So the most recent one is called Hockey Tactics 2021. I encourage you to check it out, but first check out my free stuff, and if that's what you're into, then you're in for a treat.
Well, I'm going to say right off the top, your book, Hockey Tactics 2020, helped my son's Adam team last year, led them to a finals berth, so it was a big plus.
It works.
It works. Even if doesn't matter how old you are. I try to do it at my age, but I just can't keep up with the kids. You know how it goes. And before my Habs listeners get too upset that we brought someone that worked for Toronto, you do reside in Quebec.
Yeah, so I was born in China, but I grew up in Montreal. I did all my school in French, thanks to the Bill 101. I played hockey growing up. I actually worked 1 year as a writer for the Montreal Canadiens team website. So I know the team, inside and out. A few of my friends still work for the team. So, now I live like 10 minutes away from the practice rink in Brossard. So I'm a lifelong Habs fan. Not always in agreement with what happens, but what can you do, right?
Well, that's pretty much what being a Habs fan is.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Maybe by talking about it, we can make things better. Who knows?
You never know. We can try. We can definitely try. And now I had a bunch of questions about some of your work that you did on some of the Montreal Canadiens, but I want to dive right into the newest edition first. As we're recording, today is the 24th of September, and Sami Niku just signed a 1-year, 2-way deal with the Canadiens. And you had an extremely interesting thread that talked about how to destroy young puck-moving defenseman, and you used him as the example. So can you walk us through a little bit about that?
Yeah. So actually, I've never coached Sami Niku, but I did sort of, work against him. So when I was in the Maple Leafs organization, I worked a lot with the Marlies, and obviously the Marlies, they would often play against the Manitoba Moose, which is Winnipeg's AHL affiliate. And in those years, between 2017 and 2019, basically the number one threat on the Moose whenever the Marlies played them was Sami Niku. He was a player that we had to be aware of all the time where he was on the ice, because he was very good with the puck. He was very active in transition, very good power play quarterback at that level. So he was a player that I had, that really had our attention. And over the years, it just seems like, being shuffled kind of back and forth between the AHL and the NHL, and playing on a team that maybe don't value puck moving Ds as much as other teams. Like, it really seems like his game was being stifled. And I remember, 2019, 2020, like watching his game, and it just looked like he was a shadow of who he was previously, which is really a shame when you're talking about a young player with a lot of potential.
Yeah. So it did seem as though, and I watched him play a little bit when he was in Manitoba with the Moose. It did seem like they were trying to make him more of a stay-at-home type, a more defensive-minded player than to play to his strengths.
Yeah. So the way that I would explain this is that defensemen are harder to develop than forwards because there's more things at play here. There are more things that you got to be aware of. So for a player like Sami Niku, or even Matthias Norlinder, who's another player that I've broken down in the past and who I know a little bit, their way of defending is not by boxing you out in front of the net or hitting you or making stops in the D zone. Their way of defending is, first of all, they control the puck so that you can attack them, and second, they get up ice and then they stop you up ice with their skating and with their stick positioning before you can even gain the blue line and set up. And what was happening in Winnipeg over the years is that their way of playing is relatively straightforward, where as a D, your job is just to fire the puck out of the zone, stretch past to a forward, and then stay back. So the way that Niku plays, which was very effective for him growing up in Europe, is he would go retrieve a puck, make a first play, and then sprint and get involved as the fourth forward almost. And at the AHL level, that was very successful for him initially, and he was able to get a lot of ozone time and then, make plays at the point and pinch and set up shots and chances. But the more that he played at that level and the more that he got kind of yo-yo back and forth, the more passive and the more conservative he became in his risk taking. And, for some players, it does help them to be a little bit safer. But for players like Niku, whose strength are more in transition and more in the O-zone, what that did was he was now playing more in the defensive zone, and his inherent flaws were being magnified way more than before. So, he was maybe doing what the coaches were telling him to do, but the more he did them, the less effective he became as a player, because that's just not his game. And, eventually it gets to a point where, there's probably so much friction between the player and the organization that, they decide to mutually, part ways and, pretty much go for a fresh start elsewhere.
And it does seem like he's going to get that opportunity in Montreal. And especially with the Canadiens being a transition team, most of the offense nowadays is created by that defenseman stepping up and being the fourth attacker. So that would be a beneficial role for him. Do you feel like his style and Norlinder's style are similar? I mean, you've spoken a little bit about the two of them already, but is there a comparison there?
So I do see kind of broad similarities. And for me, the hope with Norlinder is he goes back to the SHL and he really dominates this year, and then maybe he can make the jump straight to the NHL later on. And the reason why is because if you have a defenseman who's active and who likes to be in the play and be up in the rush, you want to make sure that all the physical tools are in place before you throw him into a higher league. And because if a player like that has a feeling that he can't keep up, then he's going to start playing safe, and then he's going to be ineffective. Or, if the coaches recognize that maybe he's not so overwhelmingly good offensively to merit the risk taking, then they're going to try to make his game really simple, and then he's going to suffer. So it seems like Niku's already been through that, and the hope is that Norlinder doesn't have to. Like, for me, his progression would have to be like Arturi Lekkonen's, where Lekkonen stayed in Europe for a long time, didn't even come to most of the development camps or training camps, and then all of a sudden he makes the NHL his first year in North America. Like, that's the kind of path that I see for Norlinder, and probably, it would have served Niku better to do that, even though he did put up really good numbers and he was really good in the AHL his first couple of years.
Now, do you see this signing, placing yourself in Marc Bergevin's shoes, do you see this signing as a way of insulating Norlinder, allowing him to go back, but still having the same type of player in the lineup?
Yeah, potentially I could see that. The one thing with Niku now is now it's almost like you got to build him back up, because for the past year and a half, he's hardly played games. So he's lost kind of that feeling of making plays under pressure. He played on a team that was really safe, where he wasn't really rewarded for getting involved and stepping up and joining the rush. So you gotta rebuild, maybe not his game, because he still skates and passes and makes plays, but just rebuilding his confidence and rebuilding his timing. I think like you got to take some time with this guy, and you got to give him some leash. Like, I look at the way that the Habs D-corps is organized. They probably have a shutdown pair, like a pure shutdown pair with Sherratt and David Savard. They probably have like a two-way kind of D pair with Edmondson and Petrie. So then the question is, where do the rest fit in? So you got Romanov, you got Kulak, and then you got Niku, right? Chris Weidman, I don't think he's good enough to play at the NHL any longer. Like, I've seen him plenty in the AHL, and I just don't think, like, he's good in the ozone. He's a good passer and he's a good shooter, but in transition and on defense, I just don't see a whole lot there. Mm-hmm. So you're pretty much looking at 3-man rotation at the back, unless I'm forgetting someone, which I might be.
Golubev signed a PTO, but I think that's more to protect at the Laval level than it is Montreal.
Yeah, so Golubev and Weidman are really good AHL vets. I don't really see them being factors in the NHL.
Yeah, that was my expectation on Golubev. I thought Weidman had a chance of being that 6, 7, 8 D man, depending if they go with 8 or not. But with Nico's arrival, that really shuffles the deck a little bit.
Yeah, like so speaking of Weidman, like it kind of relates to the problems that Niku is going to have, is that when you look at Chris Weidman play, like, he's a smaller guy, he's a good skater, good skills. Like, you think that he creates offense. But then if you watch him play coming out of his own end, like off retrievals and on breakouts, he actually throws a lot of pucks away, because he doesn't have that separation, whether it's speed, whether it's stick handling, whether it's like, reading the play. He's not able to separate from forecheckers. So if he has a clean play, he'll take it. But if he doesn't, he'll throw the puck away, like off the glass and out. And at the NHL level, like that's just not a good way to play, especially if you're more of an offensive player, because like you're the one, as a defenseman, you're the person responsible for getting the play down ice and into the hands of your forwards. But if you're punting pucks coming out of your own end, you're putting a lot of pressure on your teammates to retrieve pucks and to win battles. And you're essentially not going to get into the ozone often enough to really be a net positive offensively. So that's what you see with Weidman, and that's what you've been seeing with Niku. And that's why analytically, like if you talk to anybody who cares about expected goals or Corsi or Niku and Weidman, they're not really stars analytically, just because they don't get down ice with control often enough to really be able to create a lot of offense.
Now, you spoke earlier about the confidence, and I want to bring this over to Ryan Poehling. This is a young man who lacked confidence in his first professional season. Then he went down he was back and forth between the NHL and the AHL, much like Niku was. And he had a pretty good year last year. And this year, he seems to be more confident in himself. He even states that, and I'm quoting him here, he says, "You can't get frustrated with someone else's path being different from your own. I've learned that, and hopefully this year works out for me." So he doesn't seem to be putting as much pressure on himself to make the big club openly. What have you seen from him in the past that you think he has improved on, and has it improved enough?
So has he improved? Certainly. I mean, I've watched him play in the AHL this most recent season, and in terms of his ability just to work hard and, to be available, like he's gotten better. Like he's pretty good on the forecheck. He's pretty good at retrieving pucks, winning battles physically. And the thing with Poehling that's always bothered me, and this hasn't changed, is whenever he carries the puck, his upper body is really stiff, and that affects the quality of his puck carries. So a simple example is watch Ryan Poehling carry the puck and then watch Cole Caulfield carry the puck. So Poehling has the puck in front of him. His elbows are kind of collapsed. His upper body is really stiff. He's kind of bouncing up and down, and then his puck is exposed and it has a tendency to bobble. If you watch Cole Caulfield, his upper body is way more relaxed. He can kind of rotate pretty freely. He keeps his puck kind of in what we call a hip pocket, which is more to his side. So it's easier for him to underhandle the puck and not really disturb it. And that's why you see Cole Caulfield making plays at high speed under pressure, and you don't see Ryan Poehling making plays at high speed under pressure. And this hasn't changed. And if you're a player who carries a puck like this in the NHL, you're going to get picked off a lot. You're going to turn the puck over a lot. You're going to have to be more of a dump and chase, shot and retrieve kind of player. Whereas you see Caulfield is way more of a playmaker and a puck carrier. So in terms of Poehling's problems, they haven't gone away. He's doing a little bit better, but I just think that he was a poor pick in the first round. If you take this guy like 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th round, I think he's developed nicely, but with all the expectation that goes into being taken 25th overall, I just don't see it with him.
Now, I'm going to tell my listeners, be sure to go check out Jack's work on his Substack. That's at Jack Han. You can find him on Twitter. Check it out. Check out the Substack. He has a great article on Poehling. And at the end of it, you conclude that he is not going to be a third line center at the NHL level. Do you feel that he's done enough, though, to become a winger at the NHL level?
I think so. I mean, if as a third line, like left wing or fourth line winger, I'm sure he's better than a lot of the guys who have NHL jobs now. So if the Habs, if they're happy or if they're not too disappointed in that, I think he can be an effective player, and I think he can play for a number of years. But it's just, the problem is, if you have a first line player and he doesn't pan out and become a star, a lot of times you tend to give up on the guy. Remember that, Montreal got Philip Deneau because Chicago took him in the first round. He scored at half a point a game pace in the AHL, and then Chicago gave up on him and traded him for 20 games of Dale Weiss and Thomas Fleischmann, right? Yeah. So this is a pattern that you see with any number of teams, and it just happens over and over again. So I think Poehling is going to be an NHLer. I think he's going to play a number of games. Where is he going to play and what role, I don't know yet. But if we can all just kind of wipe our minds and forget that he's a first rounder, I think there's value with this guy. Now,
Dominic Ducharme, in his last press conference, was talking about the depth of players at center. He was just mentioning names, and Poehling's name came up. Do you feel that, well, obviously he's going to get used at center. Do you feel that he would be better served to play in a fourth line role at the NHL level, or just send him back to the AHL?
Honestly, I don't really think it matters, just because wherever you play him at center, I think there's going to be issues. If you play him at center in the AHL and he's putting up 3 points every 4 games or something like that, well, it still doesn't make his game any more translatable. He's going to build his confidence, sure, but he's still going to have trouble being a distributor and being, a creator for his line mates. Whereas if you play him in the NHL as a winger, then obviously his upside is going to be capped, and his confidence might ebb and flow. But really, it's one of those things where unless there's a serious fundamental change, it doesn't really matter where you put the guy, I don't think.
Okay. And speaking of more of a creator at center, the Canadiens brought in a new centerman, Christian Dvorak, former London Knight and Arizona Coyote, who comes into Montreal. And unfortunately, he's going to be compared to Kotkaniemi no matter what happens on either side. But you did a piece on him as well, and you wanted to open people's eyes a little bit to who haven't watched him play much because he plays out west, that he is a better player than some people who just look at hockey DB would expect. So what could they expect?
So first off, like I'm looking at these training camp lines and he's playing with Dvorak and Anderson, correct?
Yes.
I'm not a fan of Dvorak with Anderson simply because Anderson's game is take the puck down the right wing, shoot it, and not pass it to anybody else. Whereas if you want to maximize Dvorak's game, you got to put him with a right winger who's more of a creator. Like I'm thinking like either Toffoli or Gallagher, he would work really well with, because like Dvorak he's not an overwhelming puck carrier, but he works well in space, and you want to put him with a partner who's also a good offensive player in a collective sense. Like I could really see Dvorak playing like a tough minute matchup role with Brendan Gallagher and still be able to outscore a lot of the opposing, second or first lines. I really see it. Especially if you can find him a good left winger that's going to complement. Like it might even be Dvorak, I don't know, but it's possible. But I just think Dvorak with Anderson sells him short because he's going to pass the puck to Anderson, and then Anderson's not going to pass it back to him. And really, the value of Dvorak is he's able to make the plays at center, but then find space and get open as a shooting option. And I think Gallagher is going to be able to find him. I think Toffoli is going to be able to find him. I think Caulfield is going to be able to find him, but I don't think Anderson's the guy.
Now, Gallagher's strength in the transition game would really pair well with Dvorak. He's a good shooter. Now, do you feel that he would increase the power play for the Canadians as well?
So in in Arizona, he played the bumper, which is the middle of the 1-3-1. And Arizona had a pretty weak power play in general, but Dvorak was one of the main shooters. Like Dvorak's not a big guy. He's maybe 6 foot, 6'1", but he has this knack of getting between players, almost kind of like a Messi type of player who's playing kind of in that half space between defenders. And, in hockey, like on the power play especially, it's a really big asset to have a player who can kind of dart in and out of traffic, and then you find him in a soft spot. He's able to take a one-timer and score off that. So on the power play, I think he can be an asset in that sense, because the Habs haven't really had a player who's really comfortable in that role. Like at various times you see Toffoli or Gallagher play there. I think Armia might have played there, but they're I think Dvorak is better in that role than all of these guys.
Do you think they've done enough to fit with the addition of Dvorak and Hoffman, who's out injured for now, but will be back in about a month? Do you think with all those additions that the Canadians have done enough to improve on their 19th overall power play to where they're actually going to be, it's going to be a weapon that they could use?
Like every year I see people predicting that like this is the year that the Habs get like a top 10 power play. And every year, like it just doesn't happen. Like I remember this time last year, my buddy Eric Engel made a very bold prediction that the Habs were going to have a top 5 power play. And you just told me that they were 19th. So, we're still quite a ways off. And once again, if you look at more of the stats side, the Habs historically have had poor power plays because they don't have very good shooting volume, right? So when you have a power play that's low on shooting volume in terms of like shot per 60 or expected goals per 60, that first of all points to a problem with gaining the line with control and setting up, right? Mm-hmm. And the Habs haven't done anything to address that. Like their number one power play quarterback is Jeff Petrie, who's a pretty good puck carrier, but I wouldn't say that he's elite, especially on the power play. Like he can carry the puck up and build some speed, but he doesn't have that deception that, let's say, Victor Hedman has, or even Eric Gustafsson. Like Gustafsson would have been a much better power play quarterback, and you saw that at times last year, right? Because he's very quick laterally, he's really shifty. not a perfect player, but just has a really nice skill set in that regard. So Petrie is not really that guy, and he's not getting any quicker. Savar is not that guy. Niku's not even that guy. You're gonna have to really rework his fundamentals and get him to feel good with the puck again, and maybe eventually he can be that. But right now, I just don't really see it.
So that brings up being a possession issue. That brings up the importance of faceoffs. There's been debate in our timeline. We've been going back and forth with certain listeners and guests discussing the importance of faceoffs, and many of them feel that is not that important. But when you're a team like the Canadiens, how important are winning faceoffs?
Well, I mean, with all the other things that we got going on, it's winning faceoffs can buy you an inch, whereas being better at the other side of the game, the other aspects that we talked about, that buys you a foot, right? Yeah. It does help, it does make a difference, but the question is how much relative to other factors.
Yeah, and without those other factors, if all you get is an inch, you still need more.
Exactly.
Now, I'm gonna ask you for a hot take here. It doesn't have to be about the Canadiens, but just a hot take in general for this season. Something that you would expect?
I think the Habs are really in tough to make the playoffs because, Tampa's still very good, even though they lost their entire, second/third line with that Gord unit. They lost. They're still a really good team. Toronto's still a really good team. Florida is a team on the rise, and they're only getting better. They added Sam Reinhart, which is going to be a big thing for them. Boston's still kicking around. They might be a little bit vulnerable, but in terms of playoffs, that's it, right? I just named all the playoff seeds in the Atlantic. So which team is Montreal going to leapfrog? If they do better than Boston, they still got to fight through 3 other teams, right?
So do you, if they were to find a way to leapfrog, what would they need to add to the team in your regard to actually be able to leapfrog enough teams to make the playoffs?
So the one thing that Elon Musk talks about when he talks about Tesla and SpaceX is, in his mind, the product is not the Tesla car or the SpaceX rocket. For him, the product is the factory that creates those products, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does.
So, I've been a Habs fan since 1997. So a good number of years, 25 years. And every few years, we're we got to start over. We got to trade everybody. We got to, sign these guys and change the coach and change the GM. And at no point did I feel like there was really a concerted effort to build a factory, right? Where are we getting our coaches? Where are we getting our managers? Where are we getting our scouts? Where are we getting our players? It's all really haphazard. Montreal is a city with such a hockey history and such passionate fans and such interested people. I know because I'm one of them, right? And I love this team and I work for this team. And the thing that really pains me is there was never a concerted effort to make this organization more than any other team. You have a lot of local people that you can tap into. And I don't just mean players, because every other year it seems like people complain that the Habs aren't signing enough French Canadian players. But just why don't they have a player development department that makes players better? Why don't they grow their coaches in-house instead of hiring them from elsewhere? Why don't they have some sort of a scouting trainee program or a management trainee program where you can tap into the passion and knowledge in the province and build something that's not cycle dependent, right? Because where are we in the cycle right now? And you could say that we're rebuilding, we're contending, it doesn't matter. But like a cycle is still a cycle. Like if you go up, you're going to come back down. So like this really bothers me. And like if ever I was in a position to have any say in how the team is run, like this will be what I would care about. Like I wouldn't even care about who's the UFA or who's the draft pick. Like I would hire people to let them make those decisions. But for me, it's just like, how can I build a hockey factory where it's self-sustaining and, you know, I could be out of here in 3 or 5 years and it's still self-sustaining. And I just don't see that. And honestly, as a Montrealer, like it just really pains me. Like it hurts me on a very deep level. And, you know, like I was a fan before working for the team, and after working for the team, and after working for another NHL team, like it's just my relationship with the organization, you know, it changes over time. And like I just look at it with a lot of like bitterness and almost resentment, because there's so much that we can do for not a lot of money, but it's just not being done. And I just think it's so foolish.
Do you feel that adding an ECHL or a double A, like a baseball style system, is a start? And what could they add to that? Like a whole department, specialty coaches? Like it's hard to tell, but is that at least a start?
I mean, certainly it's a start. I mean, it's if you remember, you know, if any good Habs fan will tell you that back in the 40s, 50s, 60s under Frank Selke, the Habs had the biggest farm system in the NHL, right? They were getting players not only from Quebec, where they had this kind of grandfather territorial advantage where they can sign whoever they wanted, but they were getting players from Ontario, they were getting players from Saskatchewan. Like they had club teams all over, sponsor teams all over the country. And so certainly if you want to expand your reach and get more players into the system, that's a way to do it. Now with the ECHL teams, like that's probably one player that you're going to develop every other year that's going to graduate to your NHL team. So, you know, like a Yanni Gourde who started in the ECHL, or a David Desharnais who started in the ECHL, like they come around only once in a few years. So however long Montreal decides to do this, they got to understand that they might only get one player out of it. So then players aren't the only thing. We're talking about equipment staff. We're talking about coaches. We're talking about scouts, analysts, like people on the business side. Like, so maybe that's the intention, but then there's got to be a certain consistency and a certain will to do this long term and to expand, right?
Yeah. Well, as difficult as it is for people to hear, that is the truth that needs to be heard. I've been banging the drum for years as well, hoping for something at the lower levels to start developing more. And I'm hopeful. That's all I can really say. But before we sign off, because I know you're very busy, I don't want to take up too much of your time. But before we sign off, can you let my listeners know where to find you again?
So the easiest way to find me is on Twitter. My handle is JHANHKY. So you're going to get a lot of free content. I tweet on a regular basis. If you like what you see, then you can sign up for my free newsletter. There's a link to sign up on my Twitter profile. And then if you really want the good stuff, you can buy one of my ebooks. The most recent one is called Hockey Tactics 2021. It has 10 chapters filled with insights on how the best NHLers play, what separates a good team from a bad team, my experiences interviewing for the Maple Leafs job with Lou Lamoriello and Kyle Dubas, some personal anecdotes explaining how I got to where I am today. So a lot of good stuff for players who want to get better, coaches who want to get better, parents who want to understand the game more, or people who want to work in the game. So that's it for me.
Well, as someone who has purchased a couple of these, one of these books already, at least, I know it helped me as a coach, not so much as a player, because, you know, I'm old and I lack talent, but I try. But I definitely urge my listeners to check it out and buy it. So I want to thank you for giving me some of your time today and
Yeah.
giving us a really good insight. I really appreciate it, Jack.
And then the final thing I'd say is whenever I talk about the Habs, like I just get really down, and it sucks. I don't like it. But what I would say, you know, as a longtime Habs fan and as a Montrealer is, if you love this team and, you know, if you love the sport, just be the change that you want to see. You know, like do a good job playing, or do a good job developing players, and maybe one day it's going to trickle down, and you know those players are going to make the Habs, or maybe you're going to coach the Habs or whatever. Like, you know, just spend less time getting depressed over this team and spend more time, you know, being the change that you want to see.
That's actually excellent, excellent advice. And I'm going to use it for more entertainment from time to time. And I can't wait to get back to Montreal and be in person someday.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, and take care.
You too. Thanks a lot.